Okay, so we're still focusing in on our user interface, and specifically this, the document-aware toolbar in the 3D modeling environment. We are now going to take a look at the blank command, here. If we click on the black drop-down arrow, there are several blank commands available. The blank command allows us to blank out an entity. Much like when disabling a layer, we hide that entity from view. However, we can think of the blank command in slightly different terms. Let's take a look. So let's blank out this red shape. Left click to select the shape, and then we left click on the blank command. Okay, so where has it gone? Well, we can think of it in terms of this. When we blank an entity, we are transferring it to a secondary 3D environment. And we can navigate into this environment by clicking on the black drop-down arrow and left-clicking our swap entity visibility. This will take us into the secondary environment. If we'd like to, we can continue our modeling and designing in this environment. So let's swap back. And now let's blank out a few curves. Set the entity filter to curve. Navigate to the blank command. It brings up the blank input manager. And we can window pick a couple of curves. Confirm, and they are blanked. Okay, now let's set our entity filter back to shape, and we will take a look at our right click blank. Okay, so if we hover over our shape that we wish to blank out and right click, we will see our right click options, and blank is one of them. Left click and it blanks it out. Okay, so how do we unblank shapes? Well, it's very simple. We navigate into our blank command, select unblank. This will take us into the secondary environment, and then we can unblank any entity that we wish. And we can pick more than one. So let's also pick a curve. Confirm the operation, here, here, or middle click, and we see they have been unblanked. We are also able to unblank all. This will take all of our blanked entities back into our primary 3D modeling environment, like so. So this is the blank command. Next to the blank command in the document-aware toolbar, we have our dimensions command. This does exactly what it says on the tin. Left click to reveal the dimensions that we have defined for our entities, and left click again to hide them. Within this document-aware toolbar, we also have zoom commands, our view commands as we saw previously, and here we have a display related command. For example, we can remove our edges from view. Left click, and we can no longer see the black lines that define our edges. They are currently hidden in shaded mode. Left click to display edges in shaded mode. This one here says that we have removed hidden lines. If we left click, it will display the hidden lines. These are all of our lines that would otherwise be hidden by surfaces. So here we can see our edges and our datums. This also allows us to pick these edges through the surfaces. For example, let's put our entity filter onto edge, and you can see we now have the ability to pick these edges. Left click to hide. Next we have our display modes. We are currently in the shaded display mode. The wireframe display mode will hide all of our surfaces and faces. Our hidden line mode gives us an outline of our objects. We also have an analyze display mode. This helps us to see continuity, tangencies, and deformities in our surfaces. Let's return to the shaded mode. Okay, so let's move on in our document aware toolbar. We've seen the purpose of the filters. We have our direct editing picking and our direct editing on and off. I will not explain the purpose of these right now, but they will come up further on in the course. Next we have our erase command. This allows us to erase entities. For example, let's set the entity filter to shape, select a shape, click on the erase button, and then we erase it. It is important to note that an erase and a delete are two different things, and I will explain the distinction between the two in just a moment. Let's undo our erase. Okay, finally in our toolbar we have an exit icon. If we click on this, we exit out of the 3D environment and into what is known as the root environment. We have a root object in our root environment. Okay, now in our root environment we have a manager. We also have a few commands in the ribbon. Here we have our part within our file. We can double click on the part name to re-enter the 3D environment for that part. We can view our part by turning our preview onto graphic and left click on the part name. Double click to enter the part. Okay, so now let's rename our part. At the moment our part name is the same as our file name. We can rename our part by right clicking on the name, navigating to rename. We can type in our name. And we can add a description if necessary. We can expand our manager to view more details about our parts. Double click again to enter, and you now see that we have our part name with our file name. You can see this up here as well. File name and our part name. Okay, so we can have several parts within our file. I'm now going to save and exit. We can exit the software with this X in the corner, or through our drop down menu, File, Exit. I recommend that you always do a save close. This ensures that you have the latest version of your design saved before you close the program. Left click, and this will return us to our initial screen. We can then exit the software using the X in the corner. Okay, so now let's start JCD LITE back up again. Double click. Okay. Here we are at our initial startup screen. Let's open our file, navigate to open, left click. We are automatically taken to our folder that we created. Left click, open. Alternatively, we can double click the file we wish to open. And we're taken straight into 3D environment. Let's exit, and in the root object we're going to create a new part. Left click on part/assembly. I will use a template just for the purpose of showing you one. Basic closed solitaire. Name our part. OK. And we have created our part. Here is our part name. In our file name, let's exit the 3D environment into our root environment, and as you can see, we now have two parts in our one file. If we set our preview to graphic, we can view what is in each part by left clicking. Now we will save and close and reopen our file. This time, instead of being taken back into our 3D environment, because we have two parts in our file, we are taken to the root object. And we can go into the 3D environment of the part we wish to by double clicking or right clicking, edit. We can also rename our part by coming into the attributes drop down menu, navigating to part, and this is where we can change the name of our part. In the same way that we can change it here. Okay, so now we're going to take a closer look at our history manager. Now previously, when I was bringing in my shapes and curves, you may have noticed that all of these operations were added into the history manager. We have the ability, using our model stop, to move to any position we want within our build history. Let's say I want to move to a time before I created my curves. We left click the model stop. Whilst holding down, we drag it up to the point in time that we would like to move to, and release. We have now moved back to a point before we carried out our curve operations. We can then step back through our history by using this icon in the replay panel. The top left icon is replay next operation. Left click and it will replay our operation. The line. We can continue in this fashion, or we can use this button, top second from the left, replay all operations, which will replay all the operations that we have created. The History Manager is an extremely useful tool. It allows us to go back in time and make changes within our history, and then replay the rest of history, keeping in mind those newly created changes. So let's say we want to change the radius of our cylinder. Instead of having to start again, we can go back in time to the cylinder operation. First of all, let's bring up our dimensions. You can see here that our radius of the cylinder is 5 mm. Let's drag the model stop up to before the cylinder operation. We can then use this edit operation icon to edit that command. We are now able to change the radius. Let's change it to 6. We can confirm the operation, and our cylinder now has a radius of 6. We can now replay the rest of history, and we have the rest of our commands, but our cylinder now has a radius of 6. Now at this stage the history is fairly simple, but as we progress in the course, our histories will build and become more complicated. We'll get to a point where we have several operations that are dependent on each other. When this is the case, we have to be more careful when going back within our history and making changes, because we do not want to break our dependencies. This will become more clear as we progress. Instead of going back in our history to make changes to our dimensions, there are two other approaches to it. First of all, we can edit our dimension right here. We right-click, navigate to Modify Value, and we can change the value of our dimension. Let's move it back to 5. Click OK, and the dimension updates. Alternatively, we can simply double-click the dimension. A second way to modify our dimension is to open up our operation in the history. All of our operations can be expanded by right-clicking, navigating to Open/Close, left-clicking, and we will see the values that we have set for this operation. The radius is 5 mm. If we right-click, edit, we can edit in the same way. And it updates. We can then minimize this operation with the arrow here. Let's save. Okay, now let's take a look at deleting. I'm going to turn off my dimensions. Let's say we want to delete line 1, this curve right here. We can drag the model stop up, right-click on line 1, select delete, replay the history, and now our line is no longer there. This will permanently delete the operation from our history. Let's undo to bring back our line. If we do not want to permanently delete our operation, but we will no longer like to see it, we can do what is called a suppress. We can do this by right-clicking, suppress. Alternatively, we can use this icon here, suppress next operation. When an operation is suppressed, you will see it in parentheses or brackets. And as you can see, the operation was played, but nothing showed up. We can replay the rest of history, and it is as if though our operation was deleted. However, it is still in our history, and we can unsuppress it at a future point if we would like to reactivate this operation. Right-click, unsuppress, and we have unsuppressed our operation. Now let's look at the difference between erase and delete. So whereas the delete permanently deletes the operation from our history and our design, the erase works slightly differently. Let's select a shape to erase, left-click, click Erase, and you will see an erase command within the History Manager. Our object is no longer there. However, it is not deleted permanently from our history. For example, we can drag our model stop above the erase, and we have our shape back. Play the operation, and this is erased. We need an erase instead of just a delete, because we may want to use an operation and then get rid of it when it has served its purpose. For example, we may have brought in this block simply as a reference. Once we have taken our reference from it, we may want to erase it from our 3D environment to tidy up our workspace, and that is where the erase comes in. We do not want to delete it because we need it as a reference point somewhere in our history, so we can simply erase it when it has served its purpose. So this is the difference between an erase and a delete.